Ahlan wa sahlan, and welcome. My name is Dave Serio. I'm the manager of the Education Department and curator of the Arab Film Festival. And welcome to the Arab American National Museum. So in our last exhibit, we talked about Arab Americans living in the United States, what life is like, and some of the issues that they're facing. We talked a lot about stereotypes in that area as well, which kind of brings us to our last and final exhibit called Making an Impact. So the reason we have Making an Impact up here is because it's important to show the impact that Arab Americans have on society. There are often so many times where when we bring visitors to the museum and we ask them, name a famous Arab American, you'd be surprised that nobody can name even one. However, there are many famous people in here that people recognize, but they may not have assumed that they were Arab American. So I have a challenge for you. Can you name any Arab Americans that are famous? Does anybody come to mind? And if not, that's okay. So we're actually going to explore Making an Impact. We're going to take a look at a few different Arab Americans that have made a major impact on society. Now, you notice when we come in here, there's different walls. So everything's kind of sectioned off according to different themes. So this first one, for example, is about activism. When we were talking out front, we were talking about how you may have organizations or people may know individuals, but they're not aware that they're Arab American. There's two really good examples up here that I personally like. The first one, of course, is Ralph Nader. So Ralph Nader, most people know him. He's pretty well known. He's known mostly as the presidential candidate that ran for president in 2000 and 2004. He's also known for a lot of safety features in the auto industry. So people know Ralph Nader by name, but they don't necessarily realize that he is an Arab American. Another really good example of that I like to point out is Candace Lightner. Most people may not necessarily know her by name, but most people know her organization. So Candace is actually the founder of Mothers Against Drunk Driving. So again, an organization that people know, but maybe they don't know it was founded by an Arab American. One of the great things about this exhibit is that it's actually very, very hands-on. So if you do get a chance to come to the museum, you're able to kind of interact with some of the exhibits. So this is one of my favorite exhibits. This one asks you, did you know that Robert George worked in the White House for 50 years, serving under 7 administrations? And now it's our job to guess what he might have done. So what do you think he did for 50 years, serving under 7 presidencies? And if you didn't get it, or if you can't come up with any answer, don't worry. Nobody's ever gotten this as long as I've been at the museum. But we push our button to reveal that he was Santa Claus. So he was the official White House Santa Claus for 50 years at the White House. He started with President Kennedy, and President Kennedy actually gave him the suit that you're seeing here. So this is his actual suit, his actual White House credentials in here. And he said that President Kennedy was actually his favorite president that he worked with. So this is a good example of an Arab American making an impact, right? Doing something positive for the community, right? Which is what we focus on here in this exhibit. My other favorite exhibit is this one right here. Did you know that writer, director, and producer William Peter Blatty won an Academy Award for the screenplay of a famous horror film? What was his film? And then it says to hit the typewriter spacebar to find out. So if you're a film fan, specifically of a horror film, you might know this very famous film, The Exorcist. Plus, I always get a big kick out of when it screams. It's very, very lifelike. So if you've ever heard of The Exorcist, that was created by Arab American William Peter Blatty. So here we are at our sports wall, and you may recognize a few famous names up here. Doug Flutie is probably one of the more famous names that we have on our sports wall. We also have Drew Haddad, Rani Saikali, and one of my favorites, Saddam Ali. So Saddam Ali is a Yemeni-American boxer who was inspired at the age of 8 by a Yemeni-British boxer known as Prince. And he actually went into boxing. He won numerous championships in his divisions. He also actually represented the United States at the 2008 Summer Olympics. And for the first 6 years of his career, he was actually undefeated. So definitely a force to be reckoned with. One of our other walls in this room is our entertainment wall. So again, You might know some folks in here, but you may not recognize that they were Arab American. Casey Kasem is probably one of the more famous folks in here. So if you've ever listened to the Scooby-Doo cartoons, he was the voice of Shaggy. If you ever listened to the American Top 40 Countdown, it was hosted by Casey Kasem. We also have Paul Anka's shirt over here. So Paul Anka being a very famous person who's Arab American. Kathy Najimy as well. So if you've ever watched Sister Act, she was in Sister Act. She was kind of the goofy kind of nun in Sister Act. She also voices Peg on King of the Hill. Very passionate animal rights activist as well. And then we go a little bit more into folks that have been around not quite as long as like Casey Kasem and Kathy, but you have folks that still have been around and are very famous in their own right. So we have comedians like Dean Abidallah and Maysoon Zayed, who are very well-known comedians who travel the country doing comedy. We have a few of their different items here. And then we have Omar Efendim, who is a very famous hip-hop artist from Syria, who's still doing a lot of amazing work. So one of my other favorite exhibits in the institution is this one right here. This one asks us, did you know that this famous Arab American's writings inspired President John F. Kennedy's famous "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country" speech? And we reveal the answer is...
So, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you.
And it's revealed that it's Khalil Gibran. Khalil Gibran, if you're not familiar with who he is, I highly recommend Googling him and getting some of his literature. He's a brilliant poet and philosopher. I believe he's the third most well-known poet philosopher in the world. So he's a very, very big deal. He's Arab American. He came over in the early 1900s to the United States and is still having an impact on today's youth who read his books. So over here we have Rana Al-Kulaybi, who is very famous for her work on the Affectiva app. And if you don't know what that is, let me show you. So Rana created an app where it would measure your emotions through emojis. So the reason that she came up with this is because she wanted her computer to be able to express her emotions and her thoughts when she was talking to her family when she was away from her family. And so that led her to create this Affectiva app that has become very popular, and many people have actually. So this is one of the last walls that we'll stop at here, is our politics wall. So you can see that Arab Americans are very politically active. If you get a chance to read some of the stories, you'll find that there are many Arab Americans who are on the Democratic side, also the Republican side, also the independent side as well. So you have some politicians like Darrell Issa. You also have folks who are part of the press corps. So Helen Thomas is probably one of the more famous folks we have in our institution. So Helen Thomas, who is nicknamed the watchdog of democracy, was a very influential journalist who covered presidents all the way from President Nixon all the way through Obama. And you can see that she graciously donated her credentials. You can see some of like her press passes, and you can see this kind of pre-computer looking thing called the typewriter, if you're not familiar with it. She worked as a White House correspondent for 57 years and is one of the many folks in our institution who is making an impact on society. And you can see many other politicians that have made an impact on society through the political arena, such as John and James Zogby, Donna Shalala, Teresa Isaac, and many other individuals. So this kind of wraps up our Making an Impact area. I hope you were able to learn some new faces, maybe place identity of Arab American on a few names that were familiar to you, and hopefully you learned about quite a few movers and shakers in the greater Arab American community.